She saw the symbol on my uniform and dropped to her knees. "You're him," she whispered. "Montana, 2089. The world had frozen, literally and otherwise. It wasn't just the cold that wrapped the northern U.S. in a thick layer of silence. It was like the human spirit itself had shrunk, cornered, and broken. Snow fell with a near ceremonial slowness, laying a white shroud over forgotten ruins, abandoned trails, and bodies that would never be found. The sun, pale and weak, barely kissed the tops of the pine trees. And somewhere among them, cut off from the rest of civilization, lived Ethan Cole, former captain in the United States Orbital Defense Force, a veteran of what was called the Veil Crisis. Ethan was the kind of man who no longer held on to certainties. It had been 3 years since everything changed. The dimensional rupture known as the Veil, the collision of realities, and first contact with life forms that didn't fit into any human classification. Ethan had lost everything: his squad, his faith in command, and his identity as a soldier. Since then, he'd been drifting through the wilderness, hunting, hiding, avoiding both humans and what was left of the others. He set up temporary camps like the one he had now, a thermal tarp tent tucked between frost-covered rocks, surrounded by silent traps. That morning, the sound hit like a muffled thunderclap, a roar in the sky, a tear in the air. Ethan ran, his old military instincts flaring to life like a forgotten muscle. He pushed through the thick woods until he reached a clearing where the ground had been scorched and the snow melted in strange, circular patterns. That's where he saw it. A ship, or what was left of one, smashed between two massive pines. The silver hull looked like it had been bitten into by some invisible force, its cracks glowing with streaks of blue energy. There was no fire, no signs of other crew, just tracks, 3 toes per foot, light, precise. He followed them, rifle in hand. Tension settled in like an old friend. His muscles knew exactly what to do. And then he saw her, sitting on a moss-covered rock, her back to him. The creature, no, the woman, looked like she came from a different reality altogether. Her skin was a deep blue, like the ocean under a full moon, catching shards of morning light. Her hair was golden, cascading over her shoulders and down her back. It was tangled, some strands caught in branches and leaves, but it still shimmered. She wore something like a translucent dress, silver and flowing like mist clinging to her form. The material seemed alive. It pulsed with the rhythm of her breathing. And even though she sat still, the air around her crackled with a sense of potential energy, like she could erupt in emotion at any second. Ethan stepped closer, careful. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice rough from cold and silence. Nothing. His weapon stayed steady, but something inside him faltered. She didn't seem hostile. She seemed lonely, almost serene. He took another step. The movement opened his coat slightly, revealing the top of his old uniform. The fabric was worn and faded, but intact enough to clearly show the emblem on his chest. A 3-eyed wolf inside a silver triangle. It was the insignia of the 3rd Planetary Intercept Division, a unit many believed had never officially existed. And then it happened. She turned, slowly, and the world stopped. Her eyes opened, golden, oval-shaped irises that looked like miniature constellations. Her vertical pupils widened as she saw him, or more precisely, the symbol. She let out a sound like a caught breath. Her eyes trembled. A shiver rippled through her arms. And then she stood, not to run, not to fight. She knelt, slowly, with reverence. Her knees sank into the snow. Her hands rested on her thighs. Her eyes never left the emblem on Ethan's chest. He couldn't move. "Hey," he murmured, swallowing hard. "What are you doing?" She lowered her head. Her golden hair fell like a curtain across her face. "That symbol." Her voice came out in an echoed whisper, almost like a prayer. "That symbol is you." Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. "What are you talking about?" You're the last juror, the bearer of the seal, the child of judgment from the first collision." She looked up again. "You weren't supposed to be alive, but you are, and that changes everything." He took a step back. His rifle dipped slightly. His blood was pounding now, like he'd been running for miles. "I'm nobody. I'm just a guy trying to survive. You got the wrong person." No, the word was firm now. "The legend speaks of you, of the symbol that survives, of the human who carries judgment and choice. The snow began to fall harder. The world around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them, a broken man and a creature from another world, kneeling before him. Ethan looked at the emblem, then at her, then at the past he had tried so hard to bury. And for the first time since everything fell apart, someone looked at him with hope. Not as a soldier, not as a weapon, but as someone who might still change the fate of two worlds. The silence that followed her reverence was heavier than any scream. Ethan didn't know what to do. The alien was still kneeling, head bowed, her posture held in a kind of respectful stillness that made no sense to him. A disgraced ex-soldier buried alive in ice and regret. The rifle was heavy in his hand, but he slowly lowered it. There was no threat here, at least not a direct one. She looked more haunted than dangerous. Do you know what this is?" he asked, pointing at the emblem on his chest. She raised her face. Her golden eyes shimmered with a strange warmth, and her expression was like someone staring at a living piece of history. "It's the mark of judgment," she said softly, her voice melodic but weighted with something deeper. Between the first and last cycles, there was a man who bore that symbol. He brought the end of one age and the beginning of the separation. Ethan frowned. Separation. Of worlds. Of species. Of blood. She stood, graceful, her movements fluid, almost like gravity didn't fully apply to her. Snow fell gently from her knees, and the golden strands of her hair swayed in the wind. "I am Calvera," she said, placing one hand over her chest, a gesture that felt almost human, like a ritual greeting. "Seventh in the line of Arathon, descendant of the Watcher's house. I came searching for a sign, and I found you." Ethan took a deep breath, backing up a couple of steps. The name sounded alien, but her English was almost too perfect. "You speak English. How?" "Genetic auditory sampling. Neural translation." She touched the side of her head, where a small embedded crystal pulsed with a faint light. "I heard your voice before I landed. Sink to it." "Before you landed?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder at the distant smoke rising from her downed ship. That looked more like a crash than a landing. Calvera tilted her head slightly. "I came alone, unauthorized, to search. I was shot down, by your kind." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to hold back an old ache in his chest. There was so much humanity had gone wrong. First contact, broken protocols, the knee-jerk military responses. How many incidents had happened far from the public eye? "You should hate us," he murmured. She studied him in silence, then stepped forward. "I don't hate you, but I don't understand. Why would you keep the seal if it was used to destroy?" Ethan swallowed hard, because it was the only thing left for my team. They died believing they were protecting something bigger. I'm not sure they were right." She stood still for a moment. Then her gaze softened. "In my culture, no one carries the seal unless they've inherited the weight of it. Even if you don't know it, you're part of the cycle." He turned his back to her. "I'm not part of anything. I just want to survive. You should do the same." He started walking back, but heard her footsteps behind him. "Wait, Calvera." He turned, frustration in his voice. "I'm not who you think I am. This is all a mistake. I'm not a savior, not a juror, not some chosen one. I was just a captain. That's it." She stepped closer. Her eyes were darker now, less awestruck. "Maybe, or maybe you're just afraid. Afraid of what it means. Afraid of what it might awaken." Ethan shook his head. The snow began to fall harder. A crow cut across the gray sky with a harsh cry, and for a moment he thought about walking away, leaving her there like a mirage in a world already lost. But something deep inside wouldn't let him. She was different, fragile and strong all at once. And even if she was a mistake, she spoke to a part of him he'd buried long ago, the part that still wanted to believe in something. "Come on," he said at last. "The storm's picking up. We need shelter." She nodded and followed him in silence to the clearing where his makeshift camp was set up. Inside the tent was cramped, warmed by a small chemical heat generator and lined with thermal blankets. Ethan flicked on a dim light and pulled out a second blanket, tossing it gently over Calvera without touching her. She sat, studying the space with quiet curiosity, like every object held a story. "You live like this, alone. Better than living around people who shoot first and ask questions later." "I understand." She ran her fingers over the fabric of the blanket. It's strange. You fear so much, and yet you create comfort. He looked at her. For the first time, he noticed small details he hadn't before. Faint markings on her blue skin, like natural circuitry, almost organic tattoos. One of them glowed faintly on her left shoulder. You're a warrior? No, she met his gaze. I'm what your people might call an observer. I collect stories, interpret signs, but I know how to fight if I have to. He sat across from her. The tension had eased, but a new discomfort crept in. Proximity. That quiet kind of silence where time starts to slow down. Tell me, Kael'vara, why call me the last juror? Because, according to the old premonitions of my line, judgment could only be restored when someone bearing the seal appeared after the final collision. Your presence. It shouldn't be possible. And that's why it is. That sounds way too mystical. She smiled for the first time, a small, genuine gesture. Sometimes, the impossible is just something not yet understood. Before he could answer, something moved outside. A sharp sound. Fast, like metal scraping across ice. Kael'vara rose instantly, eyes focused. We're not alone, she said. Ethan grabbed his rifle and moved toward the tent's entrance. A greenish glow flickered between the trees. They'd been found, and the hunt was about to begin. There was again that metallic dragging sound, like blades scraping over stone. Ethan froze, rifle aimed into the darkness beyond the tent, eyes scanning the snowy trunks. Kael'vara stood still beside him, but her posture had changed, subtly. Muscles tense, eyes glowing deeper gold. You feel that, he murmured. She nodded. Hunters. Humans. But not your kind. Ethan shot her a quick glance. What do you mean, not my kind? Their eyes, they thirst. But not for justice. For power. She wasn't talking about the usual kind of predators. This was something else. The kind of men who'd survived the collapse of the world, and liked the absence of rules. Mercenaries. Warlords. People like the Veil Hunters. A rogue group of humans who scavenged crashed alien tech, torturing survivors in exchange for weapons or control of no man's land. Ethan had heard the rumors. He never seen it with his own eyes. Until now. We need to move, he said, already gathering what little he could carry. Supplies, ammo, thermal blanket, what was left of the chemical heater. Kael'vara helped with surprising efficiency. She knew what mattered and what could be left behind, like someone who had fled before. They can trace energy pulses, she said. Your chemical heater drew them in. You used blue energy in your ship, too. Yes. And I left the trail lit up when I crashed. Ethan shot her a frustrated look. So you basically lit up a giant beacon for every psycho in the woods. She didn't respond, just lowered her eyes. For the first time, she looked ashamed. I was injured. I didn't think of everything. Ethan took a deep breath, pulled up his hood, and checked his rifle. Time was running out. He could already hear footsteps, heavy, coming in groups. He killed the tent light and grabbed Kael'vara by the hand. Come on, we'll go through the cliffs. She didn't resist the touch. Her hand was cold, but oddly comforting, like ice that didn't burn. They climbed the ridge through thin, ice-coated trees, moving fast and trained. Ethan knew this terrain. That was his edge. With every step, he heard branches snap and the distant growl of dogs, or something like them. They've got scouts, he whispered, and sniffers. Kael'vara paused. The faint light on the crystal at her temple blinked once. Sniffers. Send drones. Better nose than any dog. Can you jam them? She thought for a moment, then nodded. She touched the crystal on her head and held it for 2 seconds. A high-pitched buzz, barely audible, pulsed out. The response was instant. 2 green flashes lit up in the distance, like misfired fireworks. They're down, but not for long. Ethan smiled, for the first time that night. Remind me again why you're not a warrior. Because my war isn't fought with weapons. They reached the edge of a cliff. Below, the frozen valley stretched wide like the mouth of a sleeping beast. But Ethan knew a way down, an old mining tunnel system, dug back when the U.S. still pulled minerals from these hills. The entrance was hidden under debris, but he'd cleared a secret access point weeks ago. They made it there unseen. The entrance was covered with dry branches and twisted metal. Ethan cleared it with precision and opened the gap. Kael'vara slipped in first. He followed and sealed the entrance behind them. Inside, the darkness was nearly absolute. But the silence offered shelter. For a while, the only sound was their breathing. "They'll sweep the area," Ethan said quietly. "But we're safe here. For now." Kael'vara sat on a damp rock. The glow from the crystal on her temple pulsed softly, casting golden reflections on the moist tunnel walls. "Why help someone like me?" she asked suddenly. "Your kind blames us for everything. Some even hunt us." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Because I've seen how you see us. A distorted reflection. A mistake. But I don't believe all of you are monsters. Just like not all of us are heroes." She nodded, thoughtful. Then, from within her translucent outfit, she pulled out a small cylindrical object, something like a liquid crystal. "What is that?" "A mission record. Proof that I came seeking contact, not war. But if it falls into the wrong hands, they'll twist it, use it to start another war. Against us. Or against you. That's why they shot you down." "Yes." Ethan looked at the object, then at her. A dilemma was growing inside him. If he helped her escape, he'd be a traitor. If he turned her in, he'd gain protection, resources, maybe even forgiveness. But here, in this frozen tunnel, her gaze was what mattered. And there was no fear in it, only trust. Trust in him. "We'll cross to the other side of the mountain range," he said. "There's an old station there. We can rest, maybe even find supplies." Kael'vara studied him with a faint smile. "You say we now." Ethan met her eyes, surprised at himself. "I guess. I can't say I anymore. Not after you knelt like that." He gave a bitter smile. "Even if I still think it was a mistake." "It wasn't. But you have the right to doubt. The true juror always doubts before he judges." She reached out her hand. "May I see the symbol again?" He hesitated, then opened his coat and pulled back the lapel of the old uniform. The emblem was still there, faded but visible. The three-eyed wolf inside the silver triangle. She touched it with 2 fingers. The symbol glowed. For real. Ethan stepped back, startled. "What the?" "The seal responds to blood. To the bond. You can deny the name, but not the echo." Outside, the sound of hunters still echoed in the distance. But in here, something had shifted. It wasn't just about escape. It wasn't just survival. It was the start of an alliance. And maybe something deeper. Hours passed inside the abandoned tunnel. The cold, though softened by the earth around them, still lingered like a whisper in the bones. Ethan stayed on watch. His eyes had adjusted to the dark, his ears trained to tell the difference between wind over stone and approaching danger. Kael'vara slept, or something like it. Her body curled into a fetal shape, and the filaments of her alien clothing glowed faintly with silver hues, radiating soft warmth. She breathed slowly, almost like she was in a trance. Ethan watched her, unsure what to think. There she was, an alien, fallen from the sky, looking for something impossible, calling him the juror, like he had some great role in her fate, or everyone's. But he was just a former soldier with too much guilt and not enough faith. And then, without warning, a sharp metallic sound echoed through the tunnel. Close. Fast. Ethan spun, rifle raised in one fluid motion. The light breaking through a side crack in the tunnel wasn't natural. It was green, artificial, pulsing. They'd been found. Kael'vara shot upright, fully alert. The crystal at her temple flared with light, and she extended her hand in a smooth, trained motion. "They've surrounded us," she said. "Ow!" Ethan growled, rushing to the far end of the tunnel. The sniffers were down. They brought something new. Reversal tech. Counter jammers. She pressed her fingers to the crystal. "I should have predicted it. We don't have time for guilt. Run." The tunnel spiraled downward toward an old mining shaft Ethan had scouted long ago. It was narrow, tight, but led to an underground lake. From there, a detour could take them to an emergency exit. He just didn't know if she could swim or breathe. "Can you swim?" "In liquid, yes. If it's organic." He didn't have time to ask what that meant. An explosion rocked the upper tunnel, sending fragments of stone raining down. The green light grew brighter. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Hold on tight. And when I say jump, you jump." They raced downward. A drone appeared behind them, spherical, with spinning blades like petals on a deadly flower. Ethan spun and fired twice. The drone burst in sparks, but another followed right after. "There's too many," he yelled. Kael'vara turned and raised her hand. A wave of energy shot from her fingertips. The second drone collapsed with a synthetic scream. Now, Ethan pointed to the shaft. Without hesitation, she jumped. He followed. The plunge into the underground lake was like falling into a frozen abyss. The water was dark, heavy, and smelled of ancient minerals. Ethan swam fast, guiding Kael'vara through the submerged corridors until they surfaced in a small exit chamber. There, gasping, soaked, filthy, they pulled themselves onto a slime-covered trail. "You okay?" he asked, still catching his breath. She nodded, but something was wrong. "Where's the cylinder?" "The mission log." Ethan's stomach dropped. He searched his pockets. His pack. Nothing. "It couldn't have fallen," he murmured. Kael'vara turned pale, despite her blue skin. "It was with me in the pod, before the crash." Ethan stood up, furious. "You told me you kept it on you." I carried it the whole time, but during the escape, maybe..." She lowered her head. For a moment, he thought she was about to collapse, but it was something else. She was shaking, not from the cold, from fear. "Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "If the hunters find that record, they'll decode it. It holds trajectories, frequencies, names, not just mine." "You mean others?" She nodded, eyes shimmering with a wet glow, almost human. "I'm not the only one sent on a contact mission. If they find out, there'll be a massacre. Another war." Ethan looked back toward the dark entrance behind them. Going back was suicide, but running now will be cowardice. And then, for the first time, he closed his eyes and saw the symbol. That damned wolf emblem she revered so much. Once it had meant honor, then shame. Now, it meant something else. Responsibility. "I'll get it back," he said. "Alone. You're heading for the mountains. The station I mentioned is 20 clicks out. Can you make it?" "Not without you." "Kael'vara," he touched her shoulder. "I'm good at getting into places I shouldn't. Let me handle this." She gripped his hand tightly. Her golden eyes locked on his. "If you fall, there won't be another chance." He gave her a tired smile, one that was real. "Since the veil collapsed, I felt dead inside. But today, with you, it feels like something started breathing again." She touched the emblem on his chest. "I said, you are him. And now, I see it's true." Ethan pulled away, checked his rifle, reloaded, made a final tweak to the night vision scope. Before vanishing into the dark, he looked back one last time. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, hit subscribe, because this story isn't over yet. And then, without another word, he ran toward the danger. Snow had started falling again when Ethan emerged onto the surface, several kilometers from where they'd been ambushed. The sky was overcast, the darkness of night replaced by a dull, early morning gray, the kind of light that made shadows feel heavier, more dangerous. He took a breath. The cold sliced into his lungs like blades. He was alone now. Kael'vara was following the mountain path, and he was walking back into hell. The old mining camp, where his tent had once been, was overrun. 4 lightweight military-adapted transports sat in a circle, their wheels wrapped in snow mesh. Drones hovered above, green lights blinking. Armed men in makeshift armor barked at each other with rough gestures. No discipline. Ethan lay flat beneath a frozen bush, watching. "Veil hunters," he muttered. "War-born bastards without a code." He knew the type. Many were ex-military who'd gone rogue after the Veil crisis. Others, civilians turned predators. One stood out, tall, thick beard, multi-vision goggles, and a vest marked with alien tech fragments. The leader, and he was holding the cylinder. The artifact glowed faintly in his hand, while a drone scanned it with lilac lasers. Ethan felt pressure crush his chest. If they cracked that data, the massacre Kael'vara feared would become reality. He checked his gear. 2 pulse grenades, 3 energy cartridges, a ceramic blade, and one plan. Sneak in, retrieve the cylinder, get out alive. Almost impossible, but he couldn't run anymore. Meanwhile, Kael'vara climbed the northern cliffs, her fingers and feet adapting to the rough stone like her body had known this terrain forever. The cold didn't bother her as much as the dread. She felt a connection. Something in the air vibrated in sync with the seal Ethan bore. With every kilometer, the pulse grew stronger. And then, on a high plateau, she stopped. Something was there. A marking, etched into the stone, partially covered by snow. She wiped the snow away with her hand. It was the same symbol, the triangle, the three-eyed wolf, but older, and beneath it, in human letters, Project Oracle, Level 7 Access, Alpha Base, Decommissioned, 2076. Kael'vara stepped back, stunned. This place wasn't just a mountain path. It was a hidden facility, and Ethan had been here before. Ethan crawled through the rubble along the edge of the camp. The plan was simple. Approach the perimeter through an unmonitored route, create a distraction with one of the pulse grenades, grab the cylinder in the chaos. Not a brilliant plan, but it was all he had. He tossed the first grenade to the far side of the encampment. 3, 2, 1. The EMP blast went off silently, but the effect was instant. Drones dropped like rocks, and the hunters began shouting in confusion. Ethan ran, a shadow in the snow. He slipped behind the vehicles, dove under a tarp, rolled toward the center of the camp. The leader still held the cylinder, trying to shield it. Ethan burst from cover and struck him with the butt of his rifle. The man dropped, and the cylinder tumbled into the snow. Ethan snatched it. "Get him!" one of the hunters yelled. Gunfire erupted. Ethan zigzagged through the chaos, tossing the second grenade behind him. A flash of blinding light stunned the pursuers, buying him a few precious seconds. But it wasn't enough. A bullet grazed his shoulder. Another clipped his leg, and he fell hard. The cylinder slipped from his grasp. He crawled, blood mixing with snow, heavy footsteps closing in. It was over. And then, a flash of blue light split the sky. A beam of energy struck the ground between him and the hunters, shaking the earth. The men staggered back, screaming. And then, she appeared. Kael'vara, but not as before. Her eyes blazed like twin suns. The markings across her blue skin glowed with full intensity. The crystal on her temple pulsed like a second heart. She was activated. "Stay away from him," she said, her voice low and thunderous. One of the hunters raised his weapon. She raised her hand. His weapon disintegrated in an instant. Another rushed her. She flicked her fingers. He collapsed, unconscious. The leader turned to flee. She didn't stop him. Instead, she ran to Ethan, dropped to her knees beside him. Her hand hovered over his wounded leg, glowing softly. The pain eased, but he was still bleeding. "You came back," he murmured, a faint smile on his lips. "I couldn't leave you," she said. "The SEAL called me back." She retrieved the cylinder, still intact. "It's safe now," she said. "But you're not." Ethan tried to stand, then collapsed again. She caught him. "You'll be all right. We'll get to the station. There's medical tech there. You knew that base was there, didn't you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It was one of the possible sites. The symbol, it's etched there. Now I know why. Because I was there?" He whispered. "No, because you were made there." Ethan froze. "What?" She cupped his face in both hands. Project Oracle didn't just train soldiers. They engineered carriers, men linked to the judgment. "You were never just a captain. You were made for this." The world spun around him. The pain, the snow, the nearness of her. Everything blurred together. And at the center of it all, only one truth remained. None of this was an accident. The entrance to Alpha Station was hidden beneath a rocky outcrop buried in snow, just as Ethan remembered. Almost no one knew the underground base still existed. Built at the height of interplanetary paranoia, it had been sealed before the war even began. Officially, it didn't appear on any map. But Ethan had been here, once, and now, for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to remember. Kael'vara supported him as they descended the metal stairs. The alien cylinder was secured, sealed inside an improvised case she'd made from the remains of a downed drone. Ethan's leg wound was stable, but he limped. Each step reminded him that this time, he wouldn't walk away unscathed. "Is the base still operational?" she asked. "Part of it. There's a supply wing and, if emergency power hasn't drained, a basic med unit." She stopped and looked at him closely. "You remember all this like you were part of the project." He didn't answer, because deep down, he was starting to suspect he might have been. The inside of the station was dark and damp, metal panels covered in moss and condensation. Emergency lights still blinked red, powered by outdated solar generators. Kael'vara moved carefully, her eyes scanning as her sensors adjusted to the environment. They found a medical room after a few corridors. Ethan lay down on the exam bed while Kael'vara activated the holographic control panel. You know how to use this tech? He asked, surprised. It's similar to ours, she replied. They copied more than they should have. The machine scanned the wound, applied regenerative nanopolymers, and administered local anesthetic. Ethan let out a soft breath of relief as a wave of heat spread through his leg. Thanks, he murmured. Kael'vara cleaned her hands and sat on the edge of the bed opposite him. Do you want to know what I found on the plateau? She asked, her gaze steady. You think I was made here? I don't just think it. I felt it. She opened her palm, and a 3D image projected from the cylinder. First came the seal he already knew, the seal of judgment. But below it, names began to rotate in holographic text. One stood out in red. Candidate H, record. Ethan V, Reigns, approved. Genetic integration, 82%. Ethan sat up with effort, staring at it. I was part of an experiment. Kael'vara nodded. They used alien genetic material. Not from my species, from another. Ancient. Extinct. They called them the first. They believed, with the right fusion, they could create someone who could understand and judge between worlds. A mediator. A bridge. He ran a hand through his hair, shaken. So I'm not even fully human. You are human, but you're more than that. That's why the seal responds. That's why, the moment I saw it, I knew it was you. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was charged. Ethan looked at her. Her golden eyes locked onto his, without fear, without hesitation. And for the first time, he didn't see an alien in front of him. He saw someone who had risked her mission and her life for him. You didn't have to come back, he said softly. I know, but you did. I felt that if you died, everything I believed in would die too. Ethan slowly moved closer, sitting at the edge of the bed. The pain in his leg still throbbed, but it was no longer the thing that mattered. Why do you believe in me so much? Kael'vara hesitated before answering. Because the seal lit up. Because your pain isn't selfish. Because you doubt and still choose to do what's right. She leaned in slightly. The light in the crystal on her temple pulsed in rhythm with Ethan's heartbeat. And because, she whispered, ever since I looked into your eyes, it hasn't felt like this body is only mine anymore. He stared at her, stunned. The tension between them thickened, like the air before a storm. It got warmer, heavier. No more words, just the quiet certainty that, in that moment, nothing about their species mattered. He touched his forehead to hers. A simple gesture. Profound. Almost sacred. I should probably say this is a bad idea, he murmured. Then say it. He didn't. He just closed his eyes, breathing her in. The faint scent of ozone, tinged with something sweet and alien. And the pulse of the crystal, like a second heart between them. It felt like the universe had paused, just for this. But they both knew time would come knocking again soon. Hours later, Ethan slept, but Kael'vara remained awake, seated at the old station console. She was decoding the Oracle Project's records. There were hidden files, passwords only Ethan's blood could unlock. She accessed one. A video played. A lab. A group of scientists. And a child, wide-eyed, seated in a chair. Ethan, small, watched, tested. One of the men was saying, Candidate H is the only one who responds to the symbols without training. The genetic fusion was more stable than expected. Another voice followed. He can never know. Protocol requires memory erasure after age 12. Kael'vara paused the video. Her hand trembled. He hadn't just been created to judge. He'd been shaped to forget. And now, he was starting to remember. The alarm rang out like a steel scream. An old siren, buried deep in the metal guts of Station Alpha, howled a long, broken warning. Ethan shot up, senses foggy from the medical sedative. But instinct didn't wait. Kael'vara was already on her feet by the console, her blue skin glowing more intensely now, the crystal in her temple pulsing like a beacon in distress. They tracked us, she said flatly. They're coming down the main tunnel. Ethan stood, his injured leg burning. How many? At least a dozen. Armed. And they've got jamming devices. He gritted his teeth. There were escape routes, but none fast enough. Not with Kael'vara. Not this time. He had to fight. Lock the cylinder in Wing C's vault. Use my code, 7-1-9 Victor. He grabbed his rifle and checked the mag. This place is about to go to hell. I fight with you, she said, without hesitation. No, if they take you, it's over. If I fall, you finish this. Kael'vara hesitated for just half a second, then stepped closer. She touched his face. If you die, there will be no one left. Then I better not die. They split. He ran toward the access corridor. She headed for the storage core. The footsteps of the hunters were already echoing through the pipes. The first shot came fast. A soldier blew open the side door and caught a bullet from Ethan right in the chest. The body dropped. The others shouted and spread out. A pulse launcher fired. The explosion ripped through a wall, sending shards of metal into Ethan's arm. He fell back, bleeding, and ducked behind a pillar. You're the judged, the hunter's leader shouted, voice amplified through a worn-out megaphone. You really think you can hide her from us? I'm not hiding anything, Ethan shouted back. Just buying time. Then come on out. Let's see what's left of the Oracle. Ethan clenched his fists. Those words hit hard. He knew now. The seal, the creation, the memory wipe. It had all been part of some ancient plan. But he was more than the plan now. He was the last thing standing between another war and a second chance. Kael'vara locked the cylinder inside Wing C's vault. Ethan's code worked. When the door sealed shut, she heard something, a vibration, a specific frequency. Old, familiar. The crystal on her temple responded. The wall beside her trembled. A hidden panel slid open. Inside was an old metal capsule. She touched it, and a hologram lit up. A recording of a man with the same symbol on his chest. Ethan, older. If you're seeing this, it means I failed. Or the cycles started over. The hologram flickered. My name is Ethan V. Rains. Candidate H. Alpha Line Juror. And this is a warning. Never let the hunters gain access to the core. They don't want peace. They want control of the veil routes. Kael'vara shook. It was a loop. Ethan had already lived this. No, it was a recording from the previous cycle. Another version of him, or a piece of the project left behind. She ran. Ethan was bleeding. The main corridor was a war zone. Bodies everywhere. Lights flickering. Ethan was slumped against the wall, panting. His left arm was useless, hanging like dead weight. The hunter's leader stood before him, holding a stun baton. You should have died a long time ago, juror. Ethan spat blood. Sorry to disappoint. The man chuckled, raising the baton, but before he could strike, a blue light exploded between them. Kael'vara. She appeared like a bolt of lightning, golden eyes ablaze, as her arms wrapped around Ethan. The hunter leader was thrown against the wall from the sheer force. But it was too late. Ethan was going down. Stay with me, she cried, pressing her hands against his chest. I'm here, he whispered. Just tired. No. The crystal in her temple flared to full brightness. The markings across her skin lit up like living circuits. She leaned over him, desperate. Ethan, listen to me. You are the link. The seal doesn't work without you. A single tear slid from her cheek and fell onto the symbol on his uniform. The seal lit up, and the world exploded in white light. Time stopped. Ethan opened his eyes, and the station was gone. No pain, no Kael'vara, only a vast plain of light. And in front of him, 3 figures. Not human, but somehow familiar. Candidate H. You've awakened, one of them said. The judgment may begin. Judgment? Ethan asked. This cycle needs a verdict. Should humanity continue or not? Ethan stared at them. Is this the simulation? This is the source. And Kael'vara, she entrusted the seal to you. Now, the choice is yours. Ethan closed his eyes. He saw the hunters. He saw Kael'vara fighting. He saw the hologram of himself. All the blood, all the pain, all the hope. Then he spoke. Break the cycle. Let the link decide with heart, not fear. The light surged, and he fell back into the world. Kael'vara was holding him, crying, but he was breathing. The seal burned bright on his uniform, glowing, alive. He opened his eyes. I guess. I didn't die. She laughed, through tears. No, you saved us. All around them, the hunters were either unconscious or gone. The station pulsed with a quiet hum. Something old, something awake. And for the first time, Ethan knew. He wasn't just a soldier. He was the bridge. Silence settled over Station Alpha like a sacred veil. Soft lights ran along the metal walls, as if the structure itself had awakened. The sirens were silent. The cold had eased, or maybe the two of them simply couldn't feel it anymore. There was something warmer now, something alive. Ethan lay on the medbay cot, eyes open, but still. The pain was there, dull, constant, but it had lost its urgency. What weighed on him now was the memory of what he'd seen. The judgment, the entities, his own reflection, warped by creation, by conflict, by choice. Kael'vara sat beside him. For the first time since they'd met, she looked small, not in size, but in presence, like someone carrying a question she didn't dare ask. So that's it. Ethan finally broke the silence. I was made to judge the fate of two worlds. She nodded slowly. Not just that. You were made to feel what they couldn't predict. Fear, loss, love, the things that make you human. Funny, he said. I spent so long trying to forget the things that made me human. And now you saved us all because you remembered. Ethan breathed deep. The seal on his uniform still glowed, softer now. A three-eyed wolf, jaws open, encircled by golden spiral. What happens now, he asked. Kael'vara hesitated. Now, the judgment begins. For real. The seal was just activated. It'll send out a pulse through the Veil's pathways. The other sentinels, the watchers, they'll all feel it. She met his eyes. You called them. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. They're going to test me. No, she said softly. They're going to listen. For the first time in generations, the link spoke by choice. And if I'm wrong, Kael'vara smiled gently. Judgment isn't about being right. It's about being willing. He looked at her, tired, but alive. Why did you stay, Kael? She didn't answer right away. She walked to the station's frosted window, gazing out at the snowy peaks that cradled the valley. Outside, the world seemed frozen in reverence, as if time itself had paused. When she turned back, her expression had changed. Soft, but certain. Because when I fell into your world, I thought the mission was everything, she said. To save my species, prevent another war, deliver the cylinder to the next bearer. She stepped closer to the cot. But then, I found you. And for the first time, I was afraid to fail. Not the mission, you. Ethan said nothing, but this silence wasn't absence. It was acceptance. Kael'vara reached out her hand. We can leave, if you want. There are routes beyond the system, worlds that have never known war. And just leave everything behind. It's not cowardice if it's a choice. Ethan let out a soft laugh. You've become very human for someone with blue skin. She smiled. And you've become so much more than that. He sat up, despite the pain, looked around. The station was alive, but not just physically. There was a whisper in the walls, an echo of something ancient, deep. We can't leave. Not yet, he said. Kael'vara frowned, confused. Why not? Because the seals show me something. 3 marked locations, ruined cities, but with traces of others. Like you, like me, maybe other links, or survivors. She stepped closer, golden eyes sharp with focus. You want to find them? No, I want to free them. If they're still out there, stuck like forgotten pieces of someone else's game, they deserve a choice. Like I had. Kael'vara touched the seal on his chest. Then, our mission has changed. He nodded. Now it's ours. Not the judgments. Not the scientists. Ours. She smiled. And if they come after us again, then we fight, but with purpose. She offered him her hand. He took it, without hesitation. The touch wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. 2 different worlds. 2 incompatible creations, coming together for something no war had ever predicted. Intimacy without force. Choice without command. Alliance without submission. The next day, they left Station Alpha. The cylinder was secure, but now, it was just an artifact. The real power was the bond between them. As they walked through the snow, side by side, Kael'vara glanced at Ethan. Do you think the world will believe us? Probably not, and we'll still try, especially because of that. She laughed, a soft, unexpected sound, a laugh that didn't belong to soldiers or judgments, only to her. Ethan picked up the pace. Let's go. The next point's 300 kilometers out. I hope the path has less snow. I hope the next alien is less stubborn than you. Impossible. And together, they disappeared into the white mist. The judgment had begun, but so had the love. Days passed since they left Alpha Station. The snow gave way to thick conifer forests, where footsteps were muffled by frozen moss, and the sun filtered lazily through the canopy. Ethan and Calvaro walked in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because what needed to be understood was still sinking in. The world hadn't changed. It was still cold, still dangerous. Communications were still dead, and the threat of the hunters lingered like a shadow on the horizon. But something inside them had changed. A calm, the kind that only comes after you've lost everything, and still find a way to keep walking. They camped near a tall rock formation, shaped like it had been sculpted by ancient hands. Ethan stared at it, thoughtful. "When I was a kid," he began, voice low, "I used to dream about being a hero. Those old school ones, you know, with capes, catchphrases, saving planets with a smile." Calvara sat nearby, cross-legged, cleaning her weapon with ritual-like precision. "But then the war came," he went on, "and I learned fast that real heroes, they don't have time for speeches. They just try not to die, or not let someone else die." She moved closer and sat beside him. "Do you still dream about it? About being a hero?" She nodded. He paused. "No," he said finally. "Now I dream about being free. That's all." Calvara looked up at the sky. It was clear, and the 3 moons from her home galaxy were just faint specks in the heavens. She spoke, almost as if talking to the wind. "The first time they told me about humans, they said you were unstable, emotional, inconsistent. They were right." Ethan replied, "Yes, but they forgot to mention that this instability is also why you stand back up, even after losing everything." Ethan looked at her. The firelight danced across her blue skin, highlighting the firm, striking features he'd come to recognize as unique. "Uncommon. Fascinating. And your people?" he asked. "What did they teach you about being?" "Calvara." She went quiet for a moment, thoughtful. "They said being me meant carrying the blood of an honored lineage, that my body belonged to the mission, the cause, that feelings were a flaw, not a gift. And you believe that. I believed I was supposed to believe it. But then I saw you, and the symbol on your uniform lit up, and something inside me lit up too." She turned to him. Her golden eyes were calm now. No fear, no doubt. "That's when I knew for the first time my life was mine." Ethan met her gaze. "I don't know if I'm the right judge. Sometimes, I still feel like the kid who wanted to wear a cape and fix everything." "Maybe you're both," she said. "The kid and the link." He smiled almost sadly. "And you?" "The warrior bred to die for a mission, and the woman who brought me back from death." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and touched the seal on his chest. Its glow had faded since the last use, but it was still there, alive. A quiet reminder of everything they'd survived. "I'm no longer part of an empire," she said, "or some ancient mission. Now, I'm part of choice." Ethan laced his fingers through hers. "What do we do when we reach the other places the seal showed me?" Calvara didn't hesitate. "We free whoever still has the chance to choose. And if there's no one left." She looked at him, and her voice was steady. "Then we tell the story. Ours. So no one is ever created again to obey without knowing why." Silence returned, but now it was full, peaceful. The wind blew gently, and the fire crackled now and then. Later that night, Ethan woke briefly and turned toward her. Calvara was asleep on her back, arms stretched out, golden hair fanned across a makeshift blanket, the markings on her skin pulsing with a calm rhythm. And he thought, no one ever told me that loving something so different was possible. But no one ever told me that being human meant accepting the impossible as real. He looked up at the sky. The stars were there. Some, he knew, had died millennia ago, but they still shone, just like him, just like her, just like their story. 5 months later, the forward base in Alaska was no longer a secret, nor abandoned. Where once there had been frozen ruins and dead circuits, there was now life. The sounds of tools, voices in different languages, holographic projections analyzing fragments of the veil. Scientists, ex-military, refugees, and something new, the children of the link. That's what they called the informal group of humans and aliens who survived the hunters and joined Ethan and Calvara's cause. Not out of duty, but out of choice. Ethan no longer wore a uniform. His clothes were simple, functional, but the symbol of the judgment remained, discreetly etched into his shoulder. not as a mark of power, but as a memory. Kael'vara stayed by his side, as an ally, as a bridge, as something they hadn't yet named, but was undeniably love. In the command room of the new base, a coded transmission was finally decrypted. On the screen appeared a woman with dark skin, a weathered uniform, and the unmistakable backdrop of a distant world. "This is Captain Rematai, from the Titan Enclave," she said. "We received the signal from the seal. We know what you activated, and we want to talk." Ethan smiled. The echo of the judgment was spreading. Slowly, quietly, but it was spreading. He shut down the panel and stepped outside. The snow was melting. Spring had begun. Kael'vara was waiting for him, sitting on a stone. She was barefoot, her feet touching the cold ground like she was drawing strength from it. She still wore parts of her alien armor, now mixed with human fabrics, a visual reflection of what the two of them had become. "We got a response," he said as he approached. "Titan wants to meet." They understood what the seal means. "And what did you say?" "That we want to listen and learn, not lead." She nodded. "That's how cycles break. When symbols don't command, they invite." He sat beside her. They stared at the horizon together. For a few minutes, they said nothing, because they didn't have to. Then she turned to him, a subtle smile on her lips. "If someone had told me, months ago, that I'd end up crossing frozen forests, activating forbidden artifacts, and falling in love with a human, I would have executed them for heresy. And now, I'd execute anyone who tried to stop me from staying with you." Ethan laughed. "Is that a marriage proposal in your culture?" "That's a warning. Then consider it accepted." She leaned in, their foreheads touching like they had that night in the station. But now without fear, without open wounds, only scars and affection. The following week, they left in a small ship salvaged from orbital debris. Kael'vara reconfigured the engines. Ethan adjusted the manual controls. They were heading for Titan. And after that, maybe even farther. But before they left, they buried a message beneath the old Alpha Station's marker. A simple capsule. The message was short. "If you find this, know that the judgment is not your enemy." The symbol on our chest doesn't define who we are. The choices we make after, that's what shapes history. We chose to love what once seemed impossible. You can too. In space, as the ship slipped into Earth's silent orbit, Kael'vara adjusted the course. Ethan looked at her. "You think the universe is ready for us? The universe has never been ready for anything that's truly worth it. Then let's go mess with the stars a bit." She smiled. "Until they all learn to shine in their own way." If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, share this story with someone who believes in the power of choice. And if you want more stories like this, where humans and aliens discover together what it means to be alive, fragile, and extraordinary, subscribe and turn on notifications. Judgment was just the beginning. We'll see you in the next story.